no goaltender wants to get hit by a puck when he's got a defenseman on his left, a defenseman on his right, and two forwards in front of him, because then when he looks down, there's 6 skates right there, and there's a puck somewhere there, and he can't find it. And a lot of goals in the playoffs get scored that way, and you just haven't seen enough of it. And, you look at the way the Capitals have scored so far in these first 2 games. They've got 6 goals. 3 have come on the power play.
Right.
They've got to do more to even strength. They simply have to get more. They got to get more from that top line. That Nicholas Backstrom, TJ Oshie, Alex Ovechkin line. Right now, at even strength, it has 1 point. It has Nicholas's 3rd period goal in Game 2. They got to get more out of those guys.
How much of that has to do with sort of the strategy, the chess match back and forth between Trotz and this guy Babcock, who, again, everybody seems to indicate is one of the best bench X's and O's kind of guys, and then what kind of advantage will he have now that they're back at home, right? Because he's going to have even a better advantage.
He is going to have more of an advantage because he's going to have the last change, which means he's going to be able to get the matchups he wants. Eat more. Now, he got the matchups he wanted a bit in Washington, because you can make changes once you see what the home team has put out there. It gets a little dicey, but at home it's a lot easier because you can look out there before the face-off, and then you can call your 3 forwards and your 2D over and make a switch real quick to get that favorable matchup. Right now when you look at that top line, that Nicholas Backstrom line, they've been going out pretty much every shift, although they got away from it a little bit in Game 1. But in Game 2, it was the Nazem Kadri line, the Leafs' second line, which is a really dogged line. I mean, they're good. They got the ability to put up some offense, but they also just chase you around and wear you down, and they kind of yap a little bit, and they get involved after the whistle, and they're just a pain in the butt. And they did a really, really good job of I don't want to say shutting down, but just kind of keeping that top line for the Capitals in check. Now, it's going to be easier for Babcock, who is an excellent X's and O's guy, to get the matchups he wants. But it's not just going to be the forward. It's going to be the D, too. And remember what we talked about at the beginning, depending on if Nikita Zaitsev is going to be ready to go tonight, they're going to be throwing some guys out there who haven't played a whole lot. Because Pollock is going to be out, so they're probably going to have to go with Alexei Marchenko to replace him. Now, remember Game 1, the turnover that Tom Wilson picked off the boards and scored in overtime? That was the result of another guy who was in the lineup, Martin Marincin, who hadn't played in about a month because he was in there for Zaitsev. So eventually these injuries start to catch up with you, and I think that might be the Capitals' best hope of pulling out a win here in Toronto. I still, guys, when I look at this as a whole, I still think the Caps advance. I just think it's going to be a whole lot harder than anyone thought going in.
Well, you make me feel a little bit better about tonight, Tarik, and you make good points about the lack of depth that they have, and certainly the inexperience that they have on the defensive side. So you kind of just expect the Caps to explode in one of these games. To win the game 4-1 or 5-1, based on how they played in the regular season and based on just the overall depth of the team.
You do, except for that no sport changes as much from the regular season to the postseason than hockey does. And what I mean by that is, in the regular season, guys are playing at 7, 8 tenths most nights. In the playoffs, it's 10 tenths every single second of every single shift. And that intensity is what really, really changes the outcome of games. And that's why you see so many tight-checking, low-scoring games in the playoffs, because everyone's playing so hard. Just look at how far, how many games have gone to overtime so far in these playoffs. I believe it's 7 of 18. That's a huge number right there. I mean, that kind of speaks to the parity of the league, which is another point I'd like to bring up. I mean, 15 years ago, the difference between the number 1 seed and the number 8 seed was enormous in hockey. Nowadays, the gap between the number 1 seed and the 8 seed, it's not nearly as big as it used to be, as you're seeing in these playoffs and as you're seeing in this Capitals-Leafs series. But you're right. You look at the amount of talent on this Capitals roster. I do think they are due for a break. still have to ratchet up intensity a little bit. I don't have a problem with their effort. I don't have a problem really with their intensity, but there's another level for this Capitals team. And I think it's that 6 inches between the ears sometimes. There is another level for this group, physically, and just kind of that mental toughness to kind of push through.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see a little more of that. And I think if you can get that group to do it, and it's probably too early to start saying maybe it's not in their DNA. Just look at the last decade or so. I think it is there. I think it's getting back to what I said before. You just got to do it. And once you do it and you break through and get past that second round, I think they'll look around and go, oh, all right, now we get it. But if, you don't really know how to do it until you've done it. These next 2 games here in Toronto are going to be absolutely critical, not just for the series, obviously, but for the rest of this playoff run.